Well, welcome to Conflict of Interest for another week. I'm Greg Barnes and he's Peter Faris. And tonight a special on climate change. Last Friday, Ross Garno, the economist, released the review, his latest review into climate change policies. We also saw over last weekend some reports out from the CSIRO talking about drought conditions and the prevalence of drought conditions that are likely to occur in rural Australia over the next few years. So tonight we've got William Kinnimonth who's joining us, who's former head of the National Climate Centre and a consultant to the World Meteorological Organisation. He's also the author of Climate Change and Natural Hazard. Now, what's interesting about William is that he represents, in fact, a large pool of scientists who have a scepticism about climate change, and we've decided instead of him joining us for the usual one guest segment, we're going to have him for the whole program because we're going to try and cover a very big field tonight. Peter, climate change, Ross Garno says it's here. The assumption is it's here. It's now the language of the man on the street. Why the debate?
Well, I feel very chilled about this.
Is that your attempt at humour?
I notice in his report, and I'm reading from it, he says, the outsider, which is you and I and him, the outsider to climate science has no rational choice but to accept that on a balance of probabilities, the mainstream science is right. Now, as lawyers, we know that balance of probabilities means more probable than not. It equates roughly to 51% to 49%. But it's a very balanced test. It's not...
it's not beyond reasonable doubt.
No, and it's not scientific certainty. Now, so what I'd like to ask you, William, is why have we got an economist doing this report? Why haven't we got a scientific inquiry first?
Well, Peter, I guess the scientific inquiry, according to the mainstream, has been done. And this was the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, which was an organisation, a subsidiary body of the United Nations established to look into the impacts of carbon dioxide on climate. And this was established in 1998, and they put out their first report in 1990, and they said that, yes, there is a greenhouse effect. Yes, if we have more carbon dioxide, it will enhance the greenhouse effect. But one of the most important things they did say was that because of the uncertainties, we don't know the timing, the magnitude, or any of the regional implications. Now, this IPCC has now reported another 3 times since then. The last report was in 2007, January 2007. Governments are in a bit of a bind because it's an intergovernmental panel. The governments, without actually vetting any of the information that's gone in, have had their scientists, their officers, the bureaucrats, inputting to the panel. It's gone through an assessment process, which the government's only had a very limited input to, and then because it's intergovernmental and it's supposed to be the independent umpire, the governments then have got to take that. So there's really been no independent assessment of what the IPCC has said.
One of the things, William, that's interesting is normally in a scientific debate, and you know better than us, you're a scientist, and those who are scientists, who are our viewers would know this, there's generally a lot of toing and froing in a debate. It takes place often over a long period of time until the science is certain. There seems to be in this debate, and I should say I'm not on the side of the climate change sceptics, but it seems to be in this debate, it's almost as though it's closed down now. You either believe in it, and if you don't believe in it, you're a heretic. How do you find it when you talk to other scientists?
I think you're correct that there is the wall has been built around the IPCC pronouncement because those scientists who have made the input to it, they're defending it. That's their position. And so it's intergovernmental. The governments are taking the view for our government, for example, to say, look, we'll now have an independent inquiry into the science of climate change. It means that they're going to say, well, look, we don't trust the CSIRO, we don't trust the Bureau of Meteorology, we don't trust these others who have made these inputs. But there are a lot of scientists in various disciplines who contribute to climate. Climate is not just meteorology. Climate is the science of the oceans. It's understanding the past climate is paleoclimatology, the geologists, all of these people, and a lot of them are saying, look, these pronouncements just don't add up.
Well, Garno himself, again, and I read, says there are nevertheless large uncertainties in the science. Now, what troubles me that we're going to have this massive economic overhaul based upon science which has large uncertainties.
The Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, in its first report, it put a lot of emphasis into the uncertainties. In the subsequent reports, it has diminished those uncertainties and said, look, based on computer models which have advanced considerably over the last 20 years, we now say it's very likely that certain things are going to happen. But the computer models are run by a very small group of people around the world, and so all of this information is now being sort of focused into a smaller group who are defending what they're doing.
And we are going to really redefine our Australian economy based upon that information.
That's correct.
Could I just a couple of things, and talking again about the Garno report. Two figures from the Garno report that stood out for me, but I'd be interested in your comments on them. Garno says, and he's quoting, essentially summarising here the IPCC, since early industrial times, that is 1850 to 1899, the total global surface temperature increase has been estimated at 0.76 degrees. He then says, since 1979, the rate of warming has been about twice as fast over the land as over the ocean. During the last century, the Arctic has warmed at almost twice the global rate. Is that right, or is it open to debate?
No, that's basically correct information. But what he doesn't say is that from about 1200 to the early 1700s, the climate system was in a cooling phase. During the 1600s, Iceland was regularly in the wintertime beset by sea ice. That's right. How far down the sea ice had come. And so in the early 1700s, a new warming phase began, and this actually predates real industrialisation, the burning of fossil fuels.
So none of that could have been caused by carbon emissions?
Fossil fuels.
No, not at all. That cooling phase and the medieval warm period came after the Dark Ages, again, when glaciers had advanced, and so then they retreated. Settlements in Greenland, mining in the high European Alps and so forth, which during the Little Ice Age, the glaciers advanced, all of those activities were sort of closed down.
And what did you say about why Greenland was called Greenland?
Well, some people say it's because it was a good marketing exercise to get settlers to come across. But in fact, there were about 3,000 settlements in Greenland at its height, and they had pastures, there was cattle, they were growing grain. I gather that they had to rely upon some trade to survive.
And now then that changed.
But then, of course, the cooling came in. It is much more difficult to trade. They couldn't get the pastures wouldn't grow sufficiently for the cattle. And so all those closed down. By the 1550s, there was no settlements in Greenland.
Peter, we're going to have to cut to a commercial break there, but when we come back, we're going to have a look at that issue you just raised of fossil fuels and the contribution of fossil fuels to climate change.